bill factory. Last year, 652 or 692 pieces of legislation were signed into existence, virtually none of which, some of which, but not much of which was on point to the crisis that we face. So how about we stop doing new things and focus on fixing our existing problems? Let's focus the legislature on creating jobs, on cutting government spending, and in fixing our education system. You know, of the legislature, who wants to be on the jobs team? Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I don't know anyone who's not worried about jobs in their district, in their county. So let's take a different approach. And then last, what I would say is, you know, the next governor of California, this is not an easy job. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is hard, this is probably a 12. And I think if you have a huge need to be liked, a need to be popular, this is a very bad job person fit. Because think about it, half the people will be upset with you all the time. And while you're taking on the education establishment, the business climate, 75% of the people will be upset with you. And you have to have a core set of values that you know why you were sent to Sacramento, and you're going to have to lead in a way that I think will require, in many ways, a real spine of steel. The next governor of California has to know exactly what she believes, and she needs to stick with it.
You did mention that you've been asked more than once, why would anybody want this job? So the question that I'm going to ask that pertains to that is, and we have at least 3 or 4 questions to this point. Could you please evaluate our current governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the kind of job that he's done?
So I have a lot of respect for Governor Schwarzenegger. He stood up and was counted and chose to serve. And he's done a couple of very good things for the state of California. He overhauled workmen's compensation. When you talk to small businesses in California, they will tell you that made an enormous difference. We're starting to backslide on workmen's compensation, but that was an excellent reform. The redistricting proposition, Proposition 11, which seeks to reduce the gerrymandering, or the gerrymandering, depending on how people say it. Actually, technically, it's gerrymandering. That seeks to reduce that, I think, is a good thing. He passed that initiative, and we now have a citizens commission that is, I think, will make these districts far more competitive. I actually think he did a good thing on the water bond, as I said. This was a hard-fought piece of legislation that you know, they've been trying to put together a water solve for the state for the last 20 years. That said, in the end, the leader of the state has to be accountable for results. And the results are not good. As I said, the unemployment rate, the infrastructure, our K-through education system, Governor Schwarzenegger probably has not made as much progress as he would have liked to have made. And so the next governor of California has to take a different approach, solve problems. You know, as I see, and when I travel around this state, you know what people want? They just want people to go solve the problem. They understand that there's all kinds of challenges, but they want a leader who has a vision, who can solve problems. And particularly in this point in time, someone who has creative jobs, someone who's balanced a budget, someone who deeply understands the economy and can inject a healthy dose of business discipline into the government, I think is going to be an important element. The state of California will never be a business. It shouldn't be a business. There's so many things the government provides that are essential to people truly in need. But if we really want to provide for those truly in need, and there is no shortage of needs out there in this economic crisis, we've got to run our shop more efficiently so we can do more for the people who need it the most.
California isn't the only state in the nation with a growing gaming industry. With growing budget deficits, California and other states have expanded Indian gaming to help close the budget gap, and I guess gaming that is not Indian as well. I know you are against raising taxes, but isn't that preferable to the expansion of gambling as a revenue source?
So actually the only authorized form of gambling in the state of California, as I understand it, is in fact Indian gaming. There's internet gaming, but that's sort of that's cross-border. And so the Indians have the right to casinos and 3 types of gaming in California. And my view is that actually I won't be raising taxes. I think that's the wrong thing to do. But I also don't think that at this juncture we can look to the Indian tribes for incremental monies. Their revenues are down tremendously. Their communities are in enormous need. They are sovereign nations. We need to deal with them in fairness. And my view is this is not the place to go to close the budget gap. The place to go to close the budget gap is create more jobs in California and get our government spending. The $150 billion special fund plus general fund, or the $85 billion of special fund, this is where we have to look to first. I think that is the sustainable way to fundamentally get our budget back in balance.
There's a Houston oil development company that states they would like to drill offshore in California, and they state that the state of California could realize between $2 and $4 billion in oil lease revenue. It doesn't sound like that much money considering our fiscal crisis, but how much revenue do you think could be expected from new drilling off the coast of Santa Barbara, for example, and how concerned would you be about possible ecological damage if drilling were allowed?
Right. So I want to come back to the notion of how much money is real money in a minute. But I'm very cautious about drilling offshore in California. Historically, I have been against this. The risk to the environment, in my view, is too great. That said, there have been tremendous technology advances in offshore oil drilling. And I know better than most that technology can allow you to do things you've never done before. So I think it's something that we ought to look at, but I need to be convinced that the ecological environmental risk is close to zero. I wouldn't do it for incremental monies. What I think the best argument is, how can we help America get off foreign oil? Because in the end, if we don't reduce our dependence on foreign oil, we don't stop funding people in countries who don't like us very much, we end up with tremendous foreign affairs challenges. But let's come back to this notion that $2.5 billion isn't very much money. It's fascinating. There is no silver bullet to solving California's crisis. We're going to find it $100 million at a time, $300 million at a time. I was talking to someone the other day, and I mentioned that by shrinking the size of the government workforce back down to where we were just 5 years ago, we'd save $3.3 billion a year. And the person said to me, well, that's not very much money. Okay, the day that we decide $3.3 billion is not very much money is a huge problem. And I actually thought it was kind of emblematic of the problem we face. I mean, did you know that we own a printing company? The state of California owns a printing company that costs the state about $100 million a year. My first question is, why are we printing anything? And if we have to print something, do we need a full-time printing plant, or could we contract with a private company that could provide the printing needs at probably about half the cost? And it's only $100 million, but we're going to find $100 million here, $50 million there, $300 million there, and that's how we're going to close this budget deficit. I can tell you from having managed costs in business for 30 years, there's never a silver bullet. There's not a $15 billion cost reduction item in this budget. It's by being smart about every penny you spend. And the government has to say, if this were my money, would I be spending it this way? And I can tell you the answer to that right now is no.
Well, I have to plead guilty. That comment about $2 billion not being a lot of money was my editorial comment. Yeah, it is a lot of money, I agree. And I understand your point, it's well taken, it's a little bit at a time. So, there was a question earlier about selling California bonds, or actually about possible default of bonds. But if our legislature drags its feet in balancing the budget, how will that affect our ability to sell bonds and to support public works?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So if our legislature drags its feet in balancing the budget, how will that affect our ability to sell bonds?
It will not be good, obviously. The controller of the state of California estimates that we will once again start issuing IOUs sometime this spring. This is never a good thing. And so the legislature does need to get about solving the near-term crisis, which, as you know, is about a $6 billion shortfall between now and June. And this is not easy, because a lot of the long-term planning and work has not been done. One of the things that's interesting is that the next governor of California, who takes office in 2011, you've got to start working on the budget conceptually in 2013, 2014. Because all of you who have run businesses know that if you're going to make fundamental change by utilizing technology to improve productivity, you don't roll out a new technology system in January and it works by March and you've got savings by June. These are investments that take time. So we've got to start, while we solve the current budget crisis, we've got to make investments that will pay off later, that will fundamentally restructure how we